The winter of 1878 descended upon the Montana Territory with a vengeance that stripped the warmth from the very marrow of the earth. Snow lay thick and heavy like a burial shroud over the plains, and the wind howled with the voices of 1,000 ghosts. For a girl of only 19, this frozen wasteland felt like the end of the world. She sat stiffly on the wooden bench of the train station, her breath pluming in the frigid air. Beneath her heavy woolen coat, she wore the silken cheongsam her mother had insisted upon, its intricate embroidery hidden from the world, and around her neck was a vibrant red scarf that starkly contrasted with the blinding white outside. Her life in San Francisco, filled with the scent of incense and the bustle of the market, was a distant memory now. Her father had died in the mines 3 months ago, leaving behind nothing but a mountain of debt to the Tongs and a family on the brink of starvation. It was her mother, Madame Jew, who had arranged this. Standing tall in her own high-collared cheongsam, her face a mask of sorrowful determination, she had told me, survival is not about what we want, daughter. It is about what we must endure. This man, this rancher, he has paid the debt. He asks for a wife. You will go. And so, Mai had gone. The journey had taken weeks, moving from the rain of the coast to the biting frost of the interior. Now, she waited in a town called Iron Creek, a collection of rough-hewn buildings huddled against the storm. The station master had eyed her with open suspicion, spitting tobacco juice into a brass spittoon and muttering about foreigners. The door to the station creaked open, admitting a gust of snow and a man who seemed to fill the room with his presence. He was tall, clad in a heavy buffalo coat dusted with ice. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, but Mai could see the sharp line of his jaw and eyes the color of a winter sky. He carried a rifle in one hand and a calm authority in the other. "I'm looking for Mai," he said, his voice deep and rough like gravel. Mai stood, clutching her small carpet bag. "I am Mai." The man looked at her, his gaze lingering on the red scarf for a moment before nodding. "I'm Declan Thorne. The wagon is outside. Wrap up tight. The storm is getting worse." There were no pleasantries, no gentle introductions. He was a man of the land, hard and cold as the mountains that surrounded them. As they walked out to the wagon, Mai saw the townspeople watching from behind frosted windows. Their eyes were not welcoming, they were cold, filled with judgment. A woman on the boardwalk pulled her child closer, whispering loud enough to be heard, "That's the wolf of the ridge. And now he's brought a heathen bride on Christmas Eve." Mai climbed into the wagon, the leather seat freezing through her clothes. Christmas. She had forgotten the Western holiday was upon them. It seemed fitting that she would be sold on a day these people celebrated peace, yet offered none. The ride to the ranch was a journey through a white void. The horses, powerful draft animals, trudged through knee-deep drifts, their breath steaming. Declan spoke only to the horses, his silence a heavy weight between them. Mai huddled into her coat, watching the endless pine trees pass like sentinels. She felt small, isolated, and terrified. She had heard stories of the men out here, brutal, unwashed, and cruel. Declan Thorne had not raised a hand to her, but his silence was a fortress she did not know how to breach. They arrived at the homestead as the sun began to dip below the peaks, painting the snow in shades of violet and blood orange. The cabin was large, built of thick logs, with a barn and corrals that looked sturdy enough to withstand an avalanche. Smoke curled invitingly from the stone chimney. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly neat. A fire roared in the hearth, casting a golden glow over simple wooden furniture and rugs made of braided wool. Declan hung his coat by the door and gestured to the fire. "Warm yourself. I'll see to the horses." When he returned, he made a simple meal of stew and bread. They ate in silence, the only sound the crackling of the logs and the wind battering the walls. Finally, Declan pushed his plate away and looked at her. "I know this isn't what you wanted," he said, his voice softer now. "A girl like you belongs in a city, not trapped in a snowbank with a man twice her age." Mai lowered her gaze. "I am here to pay a debt, Mr. Thorne. Wanting has nothing to do with it." He sighed, a sound of bone-deep weariness. "The debt is paid, Mai. You are my wife by law, yes. The papers were signed in town. But this, he gestured around the room. This is a hard life. I didn't send for you to be a servant. Then why? She asked, looking up. Because the winter is long, he said simply. And a man can only talk to his horses for so long before he forgets how to be human. He stood and went to a heavy oak chest at the foot of his bed. From it, he pulled a small object wrapped in brown paper. He placed it on the table between them. It's Christmas, he said. Or near enough. A wedding gift. Mai stared at the package. Her hands trembled as she reached out. She unwrapped the paper to reveal a box made of dark, polished walnut, carved with intricate vines and flowers, wildflowers of the plains. It was beautiful, the craftsmanship delicate and loving. Open it, he urged gently. She lifted the lid. The box was empty. Confusion knit her brow. She looked at him, waiting for a cruel joke. But Declan's face was earnest. It is empty, she whispered. It's not empty, Declan said. It's waiting. My mother gave me that box before she passed. She said the most important things in life aren't things you can hold. Trust. Peace. Freedom. You put them in there when you find them. Right now, Mai, you don't know me. You fear me. And you have every right to. So the box is empty. But I promise you, I will fill it with a reason for you to stay. Until then, you are safe here. You have your own room. I will not touch you until, and unless, you ask me to. Mai sat stunned. She had expected a demand for her duty as a wife. Instead, he had given her a paradox, the box that held nothing, yet promised everything. She ran her thumb over the carved wood. Thank you, she said softly. The weeks that followed were a test of endurance. The snow did not stop. It piled against the cabin walls, burying the world in silence. Mai took over the cooking and the mending. She wore her cheongsam indoors, the silk flashing like a jewel in the dim cabin, but she wrapped herself in wool when she ventured out to help Declan with the animals. She learned that Declan Thorne was a man of routine and quiet strength. He worked from dawn until dark, breaking ice in the troughs, tossing hay, mending fences that the wind had torn down. He was isolated, yes, but she began to see why. When they went into town for supplies in late January, the reception was frosty. Men in the general store stopped talking when Declan entered. They glared at Mai with a mixture of lust and disgust. Doesn't seem right, Thorne, a man named Garrett sneered, leaning against a barrel of apples. You bringing a porcelain doll out here to freeze? Did you buy her to keep your bed warm? Mai froze, her hand tightening on her basket. Declan didn't turn, didn't raise his voice. He placed a sack of flour on the counter. I'd mind your tongue, Garrett. Unless you want to lose it. Just saying, Garrett muttered, stepping back as Declan turned his cold, grey eyes upon him. It ain't natural. What's natural, Declan said, his voice low and dangerous, is a man minding his own business. You should try it. He took Mai's elbow and guided her out, his grip firm but protective. In the wagon, he apologized. I'm sorry you had to hear that. Folks here. They have long memories. Why do they hate you? Mai asked. Because I was the only one who stood against them 5 years ago, he said, flicking the reins. There was a settlement of miners north of here. Chinese. Good men. The town accused them of stealing gold. A mob formed. I stopped them from hanging an innocent boy. They've called me an outcast and a traitor ever since. Mai looked at his profile, the scar running down his cheek, the stoic set of his mouth. He had defended her people when no one else would. She touched the red scarf at her neck, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the wool. Back at the ranch, the winter deepened. February brought storms that shook the cabin to its foundations. During the long evenings, Declan taught her to read the Western maps, and she taught him words in Cantonese. He was clumsy with the tones, making her laugh, a sound that seemed to startle him, then make him smile, a slow, rare expression that transformed his face. One evening, while Ma was sewing by the fire, she looked at the walnut box sitting on the mantel. It was still empty. But the house didn't feel so empty anymore. "Declan," she said. He looked up from his book. "Why did you really marry me?" He watched the fire for a long moment. "I was lonely, Ma. That's the truth. But when I saw the letter from the broker, when I saw your name, I thought maybe two people who don't belong anywhere else could belong to each other." He stood and walked to the window, peering out into the swirling blackness. "But I worry I've doomed you. This land, it kills anything that isn't hard as stone." "I am not stone," Ma said, standing and smoothing her cheongsam. "But I am not glass, either. Bamboo bends in the wind, Declan. It does not break." He looked at her with a profound respect. "No. I don't believe you will." March arrived, not with a thaw, but with a final, brutal blizzard. The snow fell so thick it was impossible to see the barn from the house. And under the cover of the white oat, the wolves came, not the four-legged kind, but the two-legged kind. Ma woke to the sound of shattering glass. The wind howled into the room, carrying the shouts of men. "Get up!" Declan was already moving, shoving a rifle into her hands. "The back room. Bar the door. Don't come out unless I tell you. Declan. Go." She scrambled into the back bedroom, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the thin wood of the door, she heard the front door crash open. Gunshots erupted, deafening in the small space. She heard the heavy thud of bodies, the smash of furniture. "Thorn! You come out or we burn this place down." It was Garrett's voice. "You're trespassing, Garrett!" Declan roared. "We're taking what's ours. You think you can sit on this prime land while we starve? And we'll take the girl, too. She'll fetch a fine price in the city." Ma pressed her hand over her mouth. They were here for the land, and for her. The fighting resumed. She heard a grunt of pain, a heavy fall. "Got him. Tie him up." Ma's blood ran cold. She gripped the rifle, but she knew she couldn't take on 4 or 5 men. She looked around the room frantically. Her eyes landed on the window. It was small, barely a latch, but she could fit. She grabbed her coat and the red scarf, and then, on instinct, she grabbed the walnut box from the dresser where she had moved it. She didn't know why. It just felt like the only thing that mattered. She slipped out the window into the raging storm. The cold hit her like a physical blow. The snow was waist-deep. She crawled, staying low, moving toward the barn. She could hear the men shouting inside the house, celebrating. Inside the barn, the horses were panicked. Ma saddled Declan's mare with frozen fingers. She had to get to town. She had to get the sheriff, even if he hated them. It was the only chance. But as she mounted, she saw the silhouette of a man blocking the barn door. "Well, look what we have here," a voice sneered. One of Garrett's men. Ma didn't think. She kicked the mare. The horse, terrified and powerful, surged forward. The man shouted and fired his pistol, but the shot went wide. The mare trampled him into the snow, and they burst out into the night. The ride to town was a blur of terror. The wind tried to tear her from the saddle. The snow blinded her. She clung to the horse's mane, praying to her ancestors, praying to the God Declan read about in his Bible. "Bamboo bends," she told herself. "I will not break." She reached Iron Creek just as dawn was breaking, a gray, dismal light illuminating the snow. She fell from the horse in front of the sheriff's office, half frozen, the walnut box clutched to her chest. Sheriff Miller opened the door, blinking in surprise. "What in the hell?" "Help," Ma rasped, her lips blue. "Garrett." "The ranch. They have Declan." The sheriff looked at her, then at the street. "Garrett, you say? That's a serious accusation, Missy. Garrett's a respected man. He is a thief and a murderer. Mai screamed, finding strength in her fury. He is burning our home. He shot my husband. A crowd began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Townsfolk wrapped in furs and blankets stepped out. It's the Chinese girl, someone whispered. Look at her. Mai stood up, shaking with cold and rage. She looked at the faces that had shunned her. You hate us, she said, her voice carrying over the wind. You hate him because he is good. You hate me because I am different. But he is a better man than any of you. She held up the walnut box. He gave me this. He said he would fill it with a reason to stay. But he didn't need to. Because he gave me his life. She fumbled with the latch. She hadn't opened it since that first night. She expected it to be empty. But as the lid sprang open, a piece of folded parchment fell out. It fluttered in the wind, landing on the snow. Sheriff Miller bent down and picked it up. He read it, and his face went pale. He looked at Mai, then at the crowd. What is it? Miller, a shopkeeper asked. It's a deed, Miller said, his voice quiet. And a will. Dated Christmas Eve. He looked at Mai. He signed the ranch over to you. The whole thing. And there's a letter. He read aloud, his voice trembling slightly. Mai, if you are reading this, I am gone. The ranch is yours. Sell it. Take the money and go back to your family, or go where you can be free. I knew I couldn't keep you here in this cold hell forever. My gift to you is your freedom. Forgive me for buying you. I only wanted to save you. Declan. The silence that followed was absolute. The crowd froze. The wind whistled through the eaves, but no one moved. The men who had called Declan a monster, the women who had called Mai a heathen, they all stared at the paper in the sheriff's hand. Declan hadn't married her to own her. He had married her to protect her, even at the cost of his own legacy. He had given her everything he had, expecting nothing in return. Mai snatched the paper from the sheriff's hand. Tears froze on her cheeks. He is alive, she said fiercely. And I am not leaving him. She turned to the mayor, but Sheriff Miller grabbed the reins. You can't ride back alone, he said gruffly. He looked at the men gathering. Well? Are we going to let a bunch of cattle thieves murder a man who'd give up his everything for a stranger? The shame was palpable. It burned through the cold. One by one, the men of Iron Creek nodded. They ran for their horses. The posse that rode out of Iron Creek was the largest the town had ever seen. Mai rode at the front, her red scarf flying like a war banner. They reached the ranch as smoke began to billow from the windows. The outlaws were dragging Declan out into the snow, a noose thrown over the branch of a cottonwood tree. Declan was beaten, bloody, barely standing, but his head was up. Let him go! Mai screamed, charging the mare through the drifts. Garrett spun around, raising his gun, but a volley of shots from the ridge stopped him. The sheriff and 50 townsmen crested the hill, rifles leveled. Drop it, Garrett! Miller shouted. It's over. The outlaws looked at the army descending upon them and threw down their weapons. Mai didn't wait. She slid from her horse and ran to Declan. She fell into the snow beside him, cutting the ropes at his wrists with a knife she pulled from her boot. Mai, he groaned, his eyes swollen. You came back. I told you. The box. You were supposed to leave. I opened the box, she sobbed, holding his face in her hands. I saw the deed. You foolish, stubborn man. He tried to smile, but winced. I wanted you to be free. I am free, she whispered, leaning her forehead against his. I choose to be here. With you. The townsfolk surrounded them, but this time, there was no judgment. They looked at Declan Thorne, the wolf of the ridge, and saw him for the first time. Not as a hermit or a traitor, but as a man who loved so deeply he would bankrupt himself for it. Garrett and his men were shackled and hauled away. The fire in the cabin was extinguished before it could do major damage. As the adrenaline faded, the cold returned. Sheriff Miller stepped forward, removing his hat. "Mrs. Thorne," he said, the title respectful and firm. We owe you an apology. And your husband." My stood, helping Declan to his feet. He leaned heavily on her, but he stood tall. She adjusted her red scarf, the color vibrant against the snow. "We do not need apologies," Mai said, her voice steady. "We need neighbors." Miller nodded, shamed. "You'll have them. Starting now." That night, the house was filled not with silence, but with people. The women of the town brought blankets, soup, and medicine. The men fixed the door and chopped wood. For the first time, the ranch felt like part of the world. When everyone had gone, leaving them alone in the firelight, Declan sat in his chair, bandaged and bruised. Mai sat on the rug beside him, the walnut box in her lap. "You gave away the ranch," she said softly. "I gave it to you," he corrected. "And I am giving it back," she said. She placed the deed back in the box and snapped the lid shut. "This box is not for freedom, Declan. It is for memories. We will fill it together." Declan reached down and took her hand, his rough fingers interlacing with hers. "I thought winter lasted forever," he whispered. "I was wrong." Mai smiled, leaning her head against his knee. Outside, the storm had broken. The clouds parted, revealing a vast, star-filled sky over the Montana plains. The snow sparkled like diamonds, no longer a prison, but a canvas for a new life. Spring would come. The ice would melt. But the bond forged in the heart of winter, sealed by a gift of total sacrifice, would never break. And in the town of Iron Creek, when the Christmas fires were lit in years to come, they would tell the story of the Chinese girl in the red scarf and the rancher who tried to give her the world, only to find that she was the only world he needed. Life on the ranch changed after that day. The isolation that had defined Declan's existence evaporated like morning mist. When the snow finally began to recede in April, revealing the brown earth beneath, the townspeople returned. This time, they didn't come with suspicion, but with seeds, tools, and offers of help. Mai became a fixture in the valley. She did not shed her culture to fit in, instead, she wove it into the fabric of the frontier. She planted a garden of herbs she had carried seeds for all the way from California, bok choy and ginger growing alongside the native sage and corn. She taught the local women how to embroider silk, and in return, they taught her how to preserve peaches and cure meat. The red scarf she wore became a symbol in the territory, a splash of color that meant resilience. Declan healed, though he walked with a slight limp from the beating he'd taken. He spoke more now. The silence that had once been his shield was replaced by a quiet confidence. He was still the wolf of the ridge, but he was no longer a lone wolf. One evening in late summer, as the crickets sang in the tall grass, Mai and Declan sat on the porch. The walnut box sat on the table between them. It was no longer empty. Inside, along with the deed, lay a dried wildflower from the first thaw, a ribbon from a prize-winning calf they had raised, and a small, red-knitted booty, a promise of the future growing inside Mai. Declan watched the sunset, his arm resting protectively around Mai's shoulders. "You know," he rumbled, "my mother used to say that a box is defined by what it holds. But I think she was wrong." "Oh." Mai looked up, her eyes dancing. "And what do you think, husband?" "I think it's defined by the hands that hold it," he said, kissing her forehead. The seasons turned, years passed, and the story of the wedding gift passed into legend. Travelers passing through Iron Creek would hear it in the saloon or the general store. They would hear about the winter of '78, the blizzard that froze the world, and the love that melted the hearts of a town. They would look up toward the ridge, where a prosperous ranch stood against the mountains, and see smoke rising from the chimney, a signal that in the wildest, coldest corners of the earth, warmth could always be found, if one was brave enough to open the box.